Hello, hi, and welcome to episode number 29 of an Italian knitting podcast. My name is Francesca. I'm an Italian knitter. I'm also a software engineer. I work from home. I don't remember actually what I typically say during the intro. It has been a month since I last recorded, so that doesn't help either. Life was a bit busy with work, with other life things, and I'm also kind of recovering from the typical kind of cold flu situation. So I have a little bit of a sexy voice today. I hope you enjoy it. Before jumping into the usual finished objects, works in progress acquisitions, I have a little pattern announcement, pattern release, and this is the last installment on my seasonal quartet of patterns. If you've been here before, maybe you know or remember that I've been kind of publishing little free patterns every season this past year, and we are now on to the spring pattern. We started with the summer one and we did summer, autumn, winter, and now we're kind of at the last one. It was very fun. It was a very fun kind of project, experiment for me to just write up a little pattern and publish it. I guess upload it onto Ravelry more than publish it. Publish it sounds super official. These are just kind of like recipes for very simple neck accessories that you can knit while mostly doing other things. You don't have to pay too much attention to them, which is what I do enjoy typically. They all feature garter stitch and eyelets, and the spring pattern is no different. It's called an Italian Spring Shawlette, and it looks like this. As the name implies, by the way, I don't know if I love the name Shawlette. I don't know why I don't love it. What this actually is a small shawl. So I guess Shawlette is the perfect term for this, and I shouldn't complain, so let's go. It is indeed a small-ish shawl. It's not one of the huge schlanket, shawl blankets or wraps that you might really enjoy in the winter time to wrap yourself in. This is more like something to cover up your shoulders or your neck. And this first sample that I have here is made with Knitting for Olive pure silk. So it's, I think, perfect for spring and even summer. And it's very lightweight, and it is 100 grams. So 2 balls of Knitting for Olive pure silk. As you can see, garter stitch, eyelets, the usual, and it's fairly large but not very deep, so it's perfect for wrapping and have it drape here, or you can have it on your shoulders like so. I think this would go well even with a strapless top or strapless dress, or very thin straps, and you want a little bit of kind of something to cover up your shoulders and be kind of sexy, kind of revealing but not too revealing. And as you can see, this is a triangular shawl, and I assure you that this is very easy if you want to stop a little bit before, you have less yardage or meterage, or even if you have more. So I'll show you the other two samples that I have the other two finished objects that I have that are for this pattern specifically, so that you can get other ideas. So I guess technically we're now entering the finished objects section of the podcast. This is same pattern but a little bit less yardage. This is still 100 grams, but the yarn itself is a little bit thicker. This is 500 meters and this is 400 and something meters. So just made for a smaller shawlette. And this is an example of the fact that you can knit this shawlette even smaller, but it still gives you, I think, enough coverage for a little neck accessory. This is Campolmi Filati cashmere, their cashmere yarn. And this is the label for the yarn, and it is 25 grams for 116 meters. I've used 4 bowls, which makes 100 grams. And I guess we're talking about 460 meters, more or less. This is probably more of like a cozy spring accessory, so I don't think I will be able to wear this in May or June. I think the pure silk would suit kind of like warmer weather a little bit better, but for like early spring, I think I'll get a lot of use out of this one. I would say that you can even knit this shawlette with less yarn than 100 grams. I would say just look at what you have in stash if you are interested in knitting this little accessory. This is knit from bottom up, so you start from this little corner here at the very bottom and you come up, and so you have increasingly more stitches on your needles, up, and then you bind off at the very end these stitches. And I decided to go for Icelandic bind off, which is not a sewn bind off that you do with like a separate sewing needles, because I cannot be bothered with any of that. I'm too lazy typically to do a sewn bind off if I can get away with a regular bind off that you do with your knitting needles. So Icelandic bind offs you do with your regular knitting needles. However, I went up 2 sizes with my needles for just the bind off, and you'll find a note in the pattern that you can do the same to get a bind off edge that is comfortable and it doesn't feel tight at all. The cashmere is so soft. I think if you have desire to get some cashmere yarn but you don't want to commit to a sweater quantity, having something like a neck accessory, doesn't have to be this specific shawlette. It could be like a little tiny scarf or like something small. You can kind of bask in the luxury of the cashmere yarn without spending like too much money. I guess this is still a good amount of money, but it's less than if you were to buy a sweater's quantity of cashmere. And the last finished an Italian Spring Shawlette that I have for you today is a bigger one. So I'm kind of showing you another option for this pattern, which is like knit the shawl until you finished your yarn. I think for this one, this is 160 grams, 170 grams, which is a little bit of an odd quantity. It was a leftover from a different shawl. And with like a weird quantity of yarn, sometimes you don't find the perfect pattern to knit, but with a triangular shawl like this one or other ones, you can just go until you're done with the yarn. So this is I think it was a good choice on my part to use this yarn for a bigger spring shawlette. It is made with fingering weight wool, so I think it would even be good for the winter time if you don't live in a very cold climate where you need a thicker, cozier shawl to wrap you. This would be, I think, good for like Italian winter. So that's it. And I actually have another in progress of this shawlette, so we'll talk about it again. But just to wrap things up, you will find this pattern on Ravelry if you'd like to download it. It's free, you don't have to. And yeah, this concludes the seasonal patterns that I've been uploading to Ravelry over the past few months. So it was a fun journey. Cool, my friends. On to the finished object that I am wearing, and this is the step-by-step cardigan by Florence of Handmade by Florence. And if you've seen last episode, you might recognize this garment as a previous in progress terrazzo sweater by Petite knit, which I've since frogged and re-knit into a different garment. And I'll give you a 2 minutes summary of how we got here to a different garment with this yarn. And it's because the terrazzo sweater that I had in progress, although I loved and still love kind of the effect of the fabric, it kind of has this kind of dreamy, pastel-y, watercolory kind of effect. I mean, I did love that, but the size of the terrazzo sweater that I knit, I think was a little bit too wide, too big, too much positive ease for my tastes. I am in between sizes in terms of petite knit sizes. So my bust circumference is kind of at the cusp, at the edge of two sizes, and I typically just pick the bigger one of the two because I do like oversized, more like relaxed fit, and it works well for the majority of patterns, I think, for me, of petite knit patterns, especially because I tend to knit DK weight garments, so not super bulky or like particularly heavy. So the oversizedness gives me a little bit of kind of a flowy, drapey fabric. However, with this yarn, which is, I think, cumulatively an Aran weight type of yarn with 16 stitches per 10 centimeters type gauge, it is a little less drapey. Like it's heavier, so it doesn't drape as much as if you were looking at the DK weight or even fingering weight sweater. So I feel like the oversizedness of my terrazzo sweater was a bit too much for the weight of the yarn. So it didn't actually drape and flow and being flowing, but it was a little bit stiff and kind of like boxy and quite wide. So I didn't love the fit on me. In hindsight, I guess I could have gone down like with the smaller size for my bust circumference, and it could have been fine. The other thing though is that I had modified the collar. I went for like a regular crew neck, like a regular circle around your neck, instead of the suggested turtleneck, chunky turtleneck that you'll find in the terrazzo sweater pattern. And it's because I don't love turtlenecks. I've mentioned this before. Like, I think either for the weather that we have here in Italy, or maybe for my preference, I don't know. Like, I like my garment that I'm wearing to be detachable from the neck cover. As in, like, I want to be able to remove, I don't know, the scarf that I'm wearing and keep the sweater that I'm wearing, instead of like having both of them attached. Like, the turtleneck doesn't work for me attached to a sweater, right? Like, I would rather wear like a regular sweater and then a scarf around my neck, and then when I get too warm around my neck, I'll just remove the scarf and keep the sweater. Sorry, this was a very specific rant, apologies, but I think you got what I want to say. Like, turtlenecks are a no-no for me. Like, I don't want them. And so what I've done, since I really enjoyed the actual pattern itself, like the fit, the suggested yarn and everything, I modified the collar, the neck, to be like a regular crew neck. It looked okay. I think it looked okay if you saw my last episode. However, the construction of the rest of the sweater was really meant for turtleneck. So the neckline, where you then attach whatever collar you want to make, wasn't sitting right for like a regular crew neck, I don't think. Like, it was like a bit tighter because it was meant for a turtleneck, which are typically kind of like tighter and go up. So I don't know. My modifications to make it into a crew neck were okay, but like not perfect, I don't think. So yeah, and then the last thing that happened is that the test knit for the step-by-step cardigan by Florence came up in, like, when I was scrolling on Instagram, and I got accepted into that test knit. So I was like, the yarn that it's intended for this step-by-step cardigan would be perfectly like suited for the Noro yarn plus the Mohair that I'm using for the terrazzo sweater. And that was the last straw. Like, the last straw that made me realize that I didn't want that terrazzo sweater, so I just unraveled and started this one. Cool. So that was the background on this terrazzo to step-by-step transition. And I did mention the yarn a couple of times, and I'll just give you the actual name of the yarn. This is Noro silk garden sock solo, so the very long one, and this is the famous S1 Omitama colorway, which I think not everyone loves, but a few people are really interested in, because I think the appeal here is that it's like dreamy, colorful, watercolory, but not too much in your face. Like, it has some colors, but the base is still very neutral. Like, it's a beigey cream maybe, with like some speckles and some kind of stripes that are colorful, but not too much. So I think that's why people really like the Omitama colorway. And I paired it with the Sandnes Garn Tynn Silk Mohair, of which I have a little bit of a leftover, so I'll just make something with it. And the combination really kind of gives it like a very dreamy appearance, I think. As I mentioned, this is a test knit and the test knit period is not over yet, so this is not out as we speak, but I think it will come out in maybe a couple of weeks, so not too long to wait. And it is a perfect cardigan to knit. I mean, I have not worn it enough to know if I love the fit, but I do love the fit, to be honest. I wore it like a couple of times, and I think this is perfect for my kind of bust circumference, for my, I don't know, preference. You can wear it closed or open, it looks good either way. But yeah, what I meant to say is that it's very fun to knit for being a cardigan. You very well know that cardigans are knitted flat, typically, I guess, if you don't stick them, but like regular constructed cardigans are knitted flat, so lots of purling back and forth. And especially when the gauge is quite small, you have a lot of stitches to go through. And also maybe sometimes the yarn that you're using is not fun to look at, maybe just a boring color. So I don't know, all those things kind of make cardigan knitting an experience that sometimes I don't want to go through. However, the fact that this yarn was so fun to look at and the gauge is quite large, it's 16 stitches per 10 centimeters, it just makes the experience go very fast. You just fly through the knitting of this cardigan and you finally have a cardigan with not a lot of effort. So I will definitely make at least another one. I'm thinking, I don't know if I have enough time to knit one before the summer, so maybe I'll just have to wait for after the summer for next fall and winter, but I would like one in like a fluffy, maybe like a blown yarn, or maybe alpaca, something, I don't know, like a lightweight type of fabric. So we'll see. It's a raglan cardigan, so you have raglan increases, which are very easy to make, at least in my opinion, and you just have the stitch markers, and whenever you get to a stitch marker you do the increase, but there's no like a lot of picking up stitches or anything like that for the increases or the sleeves or anything. So the only non-trivial part, or I guess the only non-trivial part of this cardigan is the button band, which is a double knitted button band, which means that you pick up stitches along the entire edge from the bottom to like here and then there, and then you knit the button band vertically. So you start from the bottom, one of the two sides, and then you knit this way. So you knit and you're done. So it's I don't know, it's an interesting construction. This was my first time doing a double knit button band, and I really like the look of it. It's a very dense, sturdy button band. It might not be the most fun or fast-paced to knit. It's a little bit slow going and kind of repetitive, but you have a beautiful result at the end, and we're not in a rush to finish things typically, right? Unless maybe there's a test knit and it's due tomorrow, and then in that case it's kind of stressful, but typically you're not in a rush with your knitting, and so you can spend, I don't know, a couple of days maybe doing the button band. The pattern, I 99% sure that will be a free pattern, the same way that Florence has the step-by-step sweater, so which is kind of the beginner version of your first sweater, and this is her version of kind of your first cardigan. However, as I mentioned, this double knit button band detail kind of elevates it, so I think this is even better than like your standard first time cardigan. So as I mentioned, I will need another one. So I clearly really enjoyed it and enjoy wearing it. The bind offs of like bottom of the cardigan and these sleeves are tubular bind off. So 2 rounds of double knitting and the Italian sewn bind off at the end, and that was kind of just my personal preference. I think the pattern calls for like Italian bind off, so just the sewn part, but I do like the double knit rounds. I think it just gives it a little bit of a tighter look. I think sometimes when I do just the Italian bind off, so just the sewn part without the double knitting, sometimes it kind of flares for me a little bit, but I do like this, I don't know, finishing with tubular bind off. The last thing that I'll mention are the buttons, and the pattern calls for 25 millimeters buttons, which means like 2.5 centimeters, and they are quite chunky. Like, I think they give the cardigan a more of a grunge, I don't know, more of like a, I don't know, cool look. However, I think if I didn't read the pattern, I would have gone for smaller buttons maybe. I don't know. Anyway, you do you. Like, there's no one really telling you what size of button you have to put on your cardigan. So if you maybe have smaller buttons, you can already use those. Or if you, even if you want to order smaller buttons, you can definitely use those. I went for the chunky buttons that are called for in the pattern, and I quite like it. So yep. And I actually did a little trick that someone in the test knit group chat mentioned, and it's to also have a smaller button in the inside, so that whenever you actually use this button, the yarn that you use to sew the buttons doesn't pull on the actual knitted fabric or knitted button band, and it kind of pulls on this little button at the inside, in the inside of the button band. I'll have to use it a few more times to really kind of decide if this is worth it to actually use a smaller button in the inside, but I had these smaller buttons already in my cupboard. Is it a cupboard? Maybe I don't know what a cupboard is, but like in a I don't know, in a storage solution in my office room, and so I just used them. So I didn't have to buy them, so I was like, sure, I'll use them. And I don't know, I like the feeling of kind of maybe they're a little bit sturdier, so I enjoy that. And if someone is interested in where I got a hold of this Noro yarn, this is actually, I didn't buy in Europe or Italy. This actually my husband brought for me from a trip in Los Angeles, California. So I don't have a good tip on where to get this Noro silk, what was the name? Silk Garden Socks Solo in Omitama, like this specific color. I don't have a good tip on how to get a hold of in Europe or even Italy, because we got this, like my husband got it for me abroad. So, but if you want to order from LA or you are in the US, I'll leave the link to the store in this video because they're so nice. And my husband actually got some more yarn for me. This last time that he went to Los Angeles, he went back to the store where he got the yarn for me, and he got some more. Cool. I think we talked about this cardigan enough, but if you have more questions, feel free to leave them below or message me on Instagram. Okay, last finished object. It looks a little bit of a random finished object. What do you think this is? It could be like a cat blanket. Where's my cat? Maybe he would enjoy this, but this is actually a square that I knit as part of a charity effort that the knitting group that I'm part of has joined. So everyone in the knitting group that I'm part of, which meets maybe like once a month, everyone, or at least the people who are interested in joining, are knitting a 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters square of knitting. It doesn't have to be garter stitch. I of course did garter stitch because I'm lazy and I cannot do anything else or any other stitch. Wink wink. And I just used scraps that I had in my stash, and the only, I don't know, thing that I paid attention to is so that I would use maybe like greens and reds and yellows. So again, I try to stick with like 3 or 4 colors and not like go super crazy, but it's not, I don't know, super elegant looking. However, this is a charity project, as I mentioned, where who wants to join will knit this type of square, and then all the squares will be sewn together by someone else, not me. I would hate sewing a million squares together, but they will hopefully gladly sew all the squares together and to make like a giant blanket. And I believe that this initiative doesn't take place only in my town. I think there are like a few, maybe many Italian cities that participate. So I'll leave the link down below in case you are based in Italy and you want to try to take part in this. But yeah, and I think the giant blanket will be draped in the city that I live in, and I think people will be able to donate money, and the money that is raised goes in support of women who are victims of violence. And yeah, I use this as kind of like a mindless knitting time, either watching TV or talking with someone else. And the construction that I've already used in another blanket that I made for my daughter, and it's also stolen from the Sweet Shop blanket by Laura Penrose, and it's one of those squares that are connected to make up the blanket, is the same construction as this one. So you start from a corner and you increase on each side of your row up until you get to the diagonal middle point, and then you start decreasing towards the other corner. And the benefit of this construction is that you don't have to cast on a number of stitches and just try to guess how many stitches make up 50 centimeters, which is, I think, a little bit difficult, because either you have to do a little gauge swatch and then multiply, or I don't know, or just be very lucky. So since I don't want to do any extra effort, I just start increasing, and whenever one of the edges was 50 centimeters, I stopped, and so I start decreasing so that I was sure that each edge was 50 centimeters. You'll find my notes in Ravelry if you want a little bit more, but I feel like it's a pretty popular construction. And with this construction, so corner to corner, you can make like a bigger blanket, whatever you'd like, a smaller blanket. You can make one of the squares of the Sweet Shop blanket. It's very smart construction. Cool, that's it. We will now move on to works in progress. I think I have 2. I'm pretty sure. Yes, I have 2. Which is, I think, on the low side for me. I think 3 is my magic number of works in progress. So, I don't know. I'm making progress, guys. So this super bright or brightly colored in progress garment is, drumroll please, a no frills sweater by Petite Knit. My most knitted and most wore sweater construction or sweater pattern is the no frills. I think you might know this already, and it's what I would call like my comfort pattern, comfort knit. I don't know, like a pattern that I can cast on almost by memory in terms of like the stitch counts, even sometimes. I don't know, maybe not. But like I know the construction of the actual sweater by heart, maybe the stitch count, I will have to double check. And you can knit the no frill sweater with like any DK weight type yarn or yarn combination. In this case, I'm doing a fingering weight yarn and a mohair. This is actually knitting for olive merino and knitting for olive soft silk mohair in the color Hokkaido. I don't know the pronunciation. And the only modification that I've done is I have a 2x2 ribbing, so collar, but also it'll be in the cuffs and the bottom hem. And the pattern actually calls for 1x1, but I don't know, I was inspired with a 2x2, so that's what I've done. And I think what also will happen to my sweater is that it'll have a split hem, which is not in the pattern, but I think I'll copy from the Diane sweater by Joanna, Colibri by Joanna, and I've test knitted actually that sweater, and the sweater includes instructions for a split hem, so I think I'll just do a split hem here in the same way. And that's it. I don't know. I really like the no frills pattern sweater because I think it just has a good amount of space, of ease underneath my armpit, which I really like. I don't like to be kind of constricted or have like wool or just fabric in general very close to my armpit. So I do like that this gives you a good amount of ease here. I know some people actually don't like it. So if you are tempted by me to knit a no frills, maybe think about, do you actually enjoy some like a construction that gives you a little bit more space, or would you rather be like super fitted? Because if you do like more of a fitted look in terms of maybe like tighter sleeves or tighter fit, this might not be for you, unless I guess you would have to go down a couple of sizes maybe to get a different look. But if you go with the size recommendation that's in the official pattern, you will come up with kind of a relaxed, loose, oversized sweater, which is, for me, it's perfect. So I don't think this will be my last no frills at all. So it's the fourth one. I've knit 3 more before. I'll have to get to 5, right? Like it's more of a round number. That's my excuse to cast on another one at some point. Yep. And one thing that I've done, I don't know, I've just realized because I have this here, is that I really tried to use these super teeny tiny circulars from Ciao. I'll show you. I think you might know which ones I'm talking about. These are the super teeny tiny short tips. Let's pretend nothing fell out. And you can attach different sizes. These are from US 4 to US 8, aka 3.5 millimeters to 5 millimeters, and you can attach them to tiny short cables. Then you can go ahead and knit sleeves with this circumference instead of doing either magic loop, which is what I typically do, or maybe DPNs. These are kind of an alternative to those methods, and I hate this. I tried at least 3-4 times to knit sleeves on these short needles. These are not for me. Like the surface of the needle is not enough for me to grip comfortably the needles, and so I don't enjoy it. Also, I don't hate magic loop whatsoever, so I feel like if you are someone who really hates magic loop or even DPNs, maybe this could be a good alternative because you hate everything else, so these might be good enough. I don't know, but just these are not good enough for my tastes for sleeves or for anything. So I don't know what I'll do with them. I kind of tried to keep them with me in hope that one day I will like them, but I'll see if a friend of mine want them and wants to use them, because these are fairly expensive and I kind of don't like that no one uses them. They're wasted, like no one is using them. They actually have different sizes. So there's a red set and a yellow set for even smaller, or I guess bigger needle sizes. So if you are looking for something similar, I mean, you can check this out and maybe they work for you. Actually, maybe you already love them and you're shouting to your screen saying like, no, these are amazing, these are lovely. I do not like them, I apologize. I don't have anything else to say about this sweater, I don't think. Oh, I can try it on for you. I mean, it's in progress, so probably it doesn't really give you enough information just by me wearing it, but maybe you can kind of gauge the kind of underarm ease, or maybe the ease here. This is kind of the style of sweater that I like, and the style of sweater that the no frills is, I guess. And I don't know if I love the color. I think I do love the color. Do I look good in this bright orange? I hope so. And the mohair, like the knitting for olive mohair, is so soft. Is this my favorite mohair? Probably. Yeah, I would say this is my favorite mohair, like the knitting for olive one. Yeah. I'll see you next time with this finished. Yeah, this is, I think, I cannot stop talking about it, but it's just perfect fit for me for like a daily sweater. So whenever I get dressed in the morning, in the kind of colder months, not in the summer, but I tend to grab one of my no frills, as in like it's relaxed fit. It doesn't like, it's not tight, it's not uncomfortable, it's cute. I think it doesn't have any details that like you stop and look at this construction and you're like, wow, that's amazing. Like, it doesn't have lace or cables or I don't know, any like shoulder details that's overly pretty or overly detailed or intricate or anything like that. These are just raglan increases. However, I think that allows you to play with the color of the yarn or different yarns and kind of have the yarn shine. English words. So yeah. So if you are looking for like a simple raglan pattern and you've not been convinced by me in past episodes, I think No Frills is my go-to. Second in progress object, sure, is an Italian Spring Shawlette, and it's a very teeny tiny one for now. I just started it yesterday, 2 days ago. The yarn is a gradient yarn, which actually started from this shade of gray. This is gray. Would you call it gray? Let's call it gray. And then went into kind of the brown, and then it'll finish with this pink, peachy pink. And the yarn is Laines Nord Poema, and it's 150 grams per 600 meters. This is like 1.5 skein of fingering weight yarn. So the typical like skein of fingering weight yarn for socks, for example, that you would use, this is 1.5 times that. 150 grams. I think it's an interesting like quantity of yarn. It's not like, I don't know. Anyway, they actually, I think, market it as like the perfect amount for a shawl. They're like 1 skein, 1 shawl or something, like 1 bowl, 1 shawl. That's kind of their motto. And that's exactly what I will do. So I will use my Spring Shawlette pattern and just go up until I'm done with this yarn. And I think based on the quantity, I think it'll be, I mean, it won't be as big as my blue one, but I think it'll be comparable. So it'll be like a larger shawlette, so more like a shawl. And I do want to use the entire yarn, so I don't have any reason to stop at just 100 grams, which is what I intended the pattern to use. It's just 100 grams, but since I have more, I'll just use it. Why not? And I do quite like the gradient. I don't know, I think this is the first time in my life, is it true, that I use like a gradient yarn. I've done like gradient projects, like I've done like a gradient sweater, but it was me manually kind of changing the yarn and doing like the fade. And this, you don't have to do anything at all. Like the yarn is already faded or has already a gradient, so you just knit. You don't even have to weave in ends. Like when switching colors, you don't have to buy multiple balls of yarn to make it into a gradient. Like, this is so convenient. The only thing is that you will have to find a gradient that you like that's already made for you, but I think they have quite a few. So you might find one that you actually like. There's one with like the blues and the purples, and I don't know. So I picked maybe like a neutral one, but there are ones that are not as neutral. So you might find like one that you're interested in. Yeah. As I mentioned before at the beginning of this episode, this is garter stitch, eyelets. From the bottom up, you increase quite aggressively, so that's why you get this kind of narrow but long, I guess wide type of shawlette or shawl. This is the least difficult of the patterns that I put up during the past year. It doesn't have, like, you can even avoid marking the right and the wrong side because you just do the same thing on each side, wrong and right. So like, this is super mindless. I would recommend it for the times where you cannot be bothered to do anything else, to think about things, but you do want to do things with your hands. Cool. Phew. I will dive into the acquisitions that I have. Up to you if you want to stick around. Either way, I love you very much. As I mentioned already, my husband got this Noro yarn, I think last year in a specific store in LA. And this time around, he was in LA like a month ago or so, and I sent him to the same shop, and I sent him with a plan to get me some more Noro. And so this is what I've got. I picked it myself, to be fair. Like, it's not that my husband picked it for me. I don't know if I think he would pick like very fun, bright colors, and he would not go for like a muted, creamy, beigey anything. So I don't know. It would be fun once to just tell him, bring me something without giving any requirements, but I'm not ready for that. And I asked for this Noro Hauni. Noro Hauni. Haun. It's 60% wool and 40% cotton, which I think it's a pretty common like Noro fiber content. Or at least I've seen like a few yarns from them who have like cotton and wool mixed up together. And I would say this is a beigey base, like a yellowy beigey base with purple, orange, yellow. The colorway is called 215. And I have 3 balls of this, which should be enough for a sweater for me. I don't know what sweater or when I'll be using this, but I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to get my hands on some Noro yarn. Then after my husband got back home from LA, I went on a work trip to Barcelona. And you know who lives in Barcelona? Lisa. She has a podcast here on YouTube. I'll link things down below on the screen. And she was so lovely. She brought me around like her area where she lives, or I guess the area where we met, which is not exactly where she lives, but close enough. And it was my last day on my work trip, and it was the same day where I was taking a flight late in the evening. So I had my luggage, but she was so nice. She brought me around, like we took a walk, and I don't know, I really appreciated that she took time out of her day to be with me. Like, we've chatted online, but I would not say like that we're like best friends and we chat every day. So she could have definitely said like, oh, I don't have time this week, I apologize, blah blah. But she was so nice. She like brought me around. We didn't only do yarny things, we also like ate and had breakfast. Anyway, and she brought me some yarn from Spain, which is, I guess, local, like a proper souvenir. This is called, let me pick a label that looks good and not disheveled by my travels. This is Carasol, and it's organic cotton. It is, I would say, maybe like a sport weight yarn. It's 100 grams for 300 meters. So 50 grams would be 150 meters. So it's maybe a little bit thicker than a fingering. And with 3 balls, I think it's quite generous. And I could make like a top or anyway, something for the summer. I really like the color. I think she picked very well. And while I was there with her, we went to a yarn store together. This is a bag from the yarn store. And I think the owner or the person who was at the store actually gifted this to me, I'm pretty sure. I really wanted one of their bags as a souvenir. So I was like, do you have a bag with your logo on it? And they were like, yes, yes. And she gifted it to me. I didn't even have to pay. So I'm very thankful for that. And I picked their bamboo yarn, Balam bamboo. This is so soft. When I think about summer yarns, or I guess spring and summer yarns, I always think about cotton, silk, linen. I don't know why bamboo doesn't come to mind, but it's lovely. So I would recommend that if you see some bamboo, you actually touch it and bring it home with you. This is a pretty color, I would say maybe like a rosy beige. And I have enough for tee, like a t-shirt. I think I'll be making the peacock tee by Knit, which is the one that I have knit 2 years ago. 2 years ago, is in a blue color, and I think it's my most worn summer tee is it true? One of my most worn summer tees, and so I think I'll just make another one in this yarn. This is a DK weight yarn. And after saying bye-bye to Lisa, she pointed me, actually she put me on the train to actual Barcelona city center, and she left me a few notes of some yarn stores, and I went to only one of them, so I'm proud of myself not to have gone to all of them and bought all their yarn. So this is the name of a store. Another tote bag. And they had a lot of their own brand. All You Need Is Love. And this is the color and the skein that I picked up. It is the softest thing. This is baby Suri alpaca 90% and silk 10%. Color is electric, and this is hand dyed in Barcelona. So everything that I bought technically qualifies as a souvenir. And near this skein of yarn on the shelf, there was a hat made in the same yarn but different color. And so I asked, is this enough to make a hat? I'm not very expert in terms of hat knitting, so I don't even know how much yarn you need. But she was like, yeah, you can knit 2 hats with 1 skein. I think what I would like to do is make 2 hats, one for me and one for my daughter, and then we can be matchy for next winter season. I think that could be a plan. And you would think that I'm done with acquisitions, but you would be wrong. We have the last yarn acquisition, which is, drum roll please. I don't know why I have it in like a plastic tub. It looks so not pretty, but look at the actual yarn, how pretty it is. It is a colorway that I don't typically gravitate towards, so I was kind of surprised that I decided for this one. The brand is called Norli. It's an Italian brand that I've not heard of before up until like maybe a few weeks ago. The friends that come to the knitting group that I mentioned before once a month, they were like, hey, we should check out this brand. We should buy like a few balls of yarn. I was like, yes, let's do it. And I think we ordered like just a couple of days after this conversation. I have enough of these fingering weight yarn for a summer spring sweater, like a long sleeves sweater type thing. I think I will use the Tolsta T pattern by the Crea Bea and just make the sleeves longer, and possibly I will pick a size up compared to my regular one, because I think the Tolsta T, actually I'm pretty sure it's meant to be more of a not too oversized t-shirt, but I do want a little bit of an oversized sweater, so maybe I'll just go up 1 or 2 sizes, and I will definitely lengthen the sleeves to like full sleeve length. The color is called Bubblegum, which is very fun. And at the same time that I bought the super bright fuchsia yarn, I also bought the Petite knit bag that I have my in progress Shawlette in. This is the smallest size of the 2 bags that Petite knit produces. I don't think she produces them herself, but you get what I mean. But I also have the bigger size in a different pattern, in a different fabric, but that's giant, and that contains my Sweet Shop blanket. So I think the bigger one is maybe good for like a blanket project, but if you just knit a sweater or like a shawl, I think the regular size Petite knit bags are perfect. And these were my acquisitions for this episode. However, there's an acquisition that I forgot to show last time, but this has been with me for at least a couple of months. I don't think it got to me for Christmas, but maybe in January, so has been a couple of months for sure. And this is a knitting book. I don't tend to buy knitting books anymore because I realized that I prefer to just browse Ravelry or Instagram and find patterns that way, instead of just like flipping through a book and finding a pattern that way. I do still love the look of them, so I grabbed this one because I really think that she's so cool. She's the designer behind Vitre Design. I don't know how to pronounce it, to be honest. But she's so cool. Like the style, the knitting style that she has is so cool. Also, let me actually show you a couple of pictures because I don't think, right? Like as long as I'm not revealing details of the actual pattern, I can show pictures. I really like this dress. This is the Nordic summer dress, and honestly everything here looks really good and I would like to make it. However, the only issue that I have with this book is that even the patterns that are listed to be like summer appropriate are knit in quite like a thick gauge or like a thick yarn. For example, this Nordic summer dress, which I'll show you some more pictures of, is knitted with 2 strands of Sandnes Garn Line. So Sandnes Garn Line is already a worsted weight yarn, so you hold 2 strands together, so it's quite like a thick yarn. So for patterns that are listed for the summer, I fear that are not Italy appropriate, or like suitable for the very hot weather that we have here. So I am not sure. So this might be a pattern book that I look at for maybe winter patterns, so maybe next winter season. But I really want to make this Nordic summer dress. It's really beautiful. So I think I could still make it but not wear it in the summer. It could be maybe like a spring or autumn dress for me. But yeah, that's my favorite one. I really also like this top. Also, she's so cool. Every time that I look at her, I want to cut bangs. Like I want to give myself bangs or like a fringe. Is that how you? Yeah, bangs. I think that's a term. Oh my God. But then I'm like, no. But look, she looks so good with that hairstyle. But anyway, yeah. So I have acquired this a while back, but I didn't show it to you. So there you go. That's it, friends. Was this the longest episode of your life? Hopefully you still enjoyed it. And I can now let you go on with your life. I'll go on with my afternoon and I'll see you next time. Bye.